Hello everybody and welcome to today's Dead by Daylight talk. Unlike previous Tyde Talks, we'll not only be covering the perk and its history, but we'll also be covering the major mechanic changes that ties in with that perk, and that perk would be Saboteur. It was arguably the single best perk in Dead by Daylight's early meta, as it granted survivors guaranteed survival. However, if you're familiar with it today, you'll notice that it's hardly ever utilized anymore. As always, we start at the release of Dead by Daylight, as Saboteur was a teachable perk from Jake that allowed a survivor to unlock the sabotage action without a toolbox. It was essentially the self-care of sabotage. It copied just about everything that self-care did to itself. Sabotage speed was limited but unlimited in use, had increased efficiency for the toolboxes, and even had a penalty for the skill checks. But its debut wasn't too much different from today's iteration of Sabotage, so what made it the best perk? Saboteur was heavily tied to the action of sabotage. Unlike the perk of self-care, it wasn't the fact that you could sabotage hooks and traps without a toolbox that made it powerful, but that sabotaging a hook or trap was permanent for the match. Once a survivor broke that hook or trap with a toolbox or saboteur, the hook and trap would remain broken for the rest of the match. The meta at the time was for survivors to focus on breaking all hooks, and the killer could not hook a survivor without using the basement. Killers at this time heavily relied on the very powerful Iron Grasp, which would typically take a survivor about 75% of the map's distance. Killers would have to run agitation to guarantee that basement hook, but that was only if survivors would not block the killer's path into the basement itself. Killers were at a disadvantage. Requiring the killer to have two separate perks in order to counter one put survivors in quite the power roll. Sabotage was a fantastic method to gain points as well, as it gave several boldness points. If you were the gen jockey for the match and didn't get any boldness points from being chased, you could just sabotage hooks for huge points to make up for what you were missing. Sabotage was one of the 4 godlike perks at the release of Dead by Daylight, and like the others, it would see change 15 days after release in patch 1.0.2. Though this patch would bring down a lot of great perks and introduce Saboteur to a lower sabotage speed from 80% to 50%, it was realistically one of the few changes from the patch that did little to nothing to lower the strength of Saboteur itself. Though yes, the perk was significantly slower in terms of percent, its overall impact did not stop teams of survivors from destroying all hooks on the map with little effort. Killers would continue to slug survivors, which was leaving them on the ground after downing them, in response to survivors sabotaging the hooks. At this time, it was still a very safe idea for survivors to run Saboteur alongside your standard build, as it let you pick up the points and control the game for as long as you were away from the basement hooks. Trapper at this time was a popular killer. His traps were able to limit survivors with what loops were infinite, and even protect the hook. Sabotage came in handy, as you could easily destroy his traps in 8 seconds each, removing the threat completely as he could never get them back. A popular killer could be rendered useless if he is not aggressive enough. The problem became one of the most infamous issues of balance for killers, as they stood no chance against the survivors without resorting to slugging or letting them bleed out on the ground. Slugging itself wasn't even a great strategy, as survivors could recover quickly, and even track each other down with perks like Empathy. Killers really had no way to stop it. It wouldn't be until 10 months after release that patch 1.5.0 would start to pull Dead by Daylight out of the dark times. Hooks would now repair after 180 seconds after being sabotaged, and this would be the final time that Saboteur would see very much use, if at all. A once extremely powerful perk, now rendered useless. The value of Saboteur was mostly in the ability to make permanent advantages for survivors, but now that the hooks returned, it was mostly for trolley gameplay, to counter the trapper, or gimmick builds from this point on, as it lost favor with majority of the players in the game. As killers could now rely on their hooks being there, some balance was restored to the game, and Saboteur was nowhere to be seen. As the game continued to progress, there actually wouldn't be any changes to the sabotage meta that would make much of a difference for Saboteur, that is. Instead, the focus became more about jumping off hooks rather than destroying the hooks themselves. As the game went on, several requests that Saboteur receive a change in order to bring it back into the game were made. Even running the perk as a joke came with its costs, as it would fall further into the realm of obscurity. Patch 1.9.4 would be introduced, giving players the new emblem system, a new win condition for both killers and survivors, and unfortunately, Saboteur would not affect these emblems and become useless. The emblem system rewarded players for working on objectives, staying alive, saving allies, and being chased. Unfortunately, sabotaging provided no rewards, so if the survivors were looking to secure a win, they'd have to hope that allies get hooked so they can gain points instead of preventing a hook that provides nothing at all other than some blood points. Saboteur would hit rock bottom in patch 2.1.0 when Trapper gets his rework. The Trapper's traps will now have a respawn function similar to the hooks. What little utility Saboteur had for countering that one killer was now gone. Jake would go to be one of the most useless survivors in the game, as 2 of his teachables were deemed completely useless, and the third was decent but did not see much play in comparison to others, as he was not worth leveling up to get the teachables anymore. Developers were seeking a solution to fix Saboteur and the sabotage meta. They were testing a couple of different methods of making it a fun and alternative method to playing the game. Patch 2.3.0 would go to introduce a new function to Saboteur specifically. Now, all tiers of Saboteur would give a 50% sabotage speed, but it would also add 30 seconds to the repair timer for hooks. That catches us up to the current meta of Saboteur, so how is it now with all of the changes? And that would be still as useless as it has been since the change to sabotage. The sabotage meta died out, as it was a waste of time and hinders the team more than it helps. It is not possible to make a major impact due to there always being a second or even third hook nearby for the killer to find. The amount of time it takes to sabotage a single hook is too costly. All the time you spend working on it takes away from you gaining points on generators and other mechanics that actually matter. There is a gimmick to make sabotage work for you, but it wouldn't be beneficial other than for a laugh, even if it does work. It would essentially require a team to work together to sabotage hooks to 99%. Once all hooks are set, then you would proceed to work on generators. If an ally goes down, you and the team would rush to their location and break the hooks in front of the killer as they tried to carry the survivor to a hook. Hopefully you make it in time and cut off all other hooks the killer changes to, and he drops the survivor. If done properly, it could be pretty rage-inducing for a killer, but the effort to set it up likely kept you and the team from working on generators. Due to this, Saboteur is not likely to find its way back into the meta anytime soon unless Sabotage is changed to be useful once again. This leaves Saboteur to be a gimmick perk. Some teams like to run no mither and sabotage, forcing killers to slug them as they get back up on their own and destroy hooks in front of the killer, making it difficult for the killer to control the game, but that does require a full team to coordinate properly, and if not done properly, works out very well for the killer. With that being said, that wraps up the history and meta of Saboteur. Did you get to experience the meta as a killer or survivor? Have you been playing with this perk today? Let me know what your stories are in the comments section down below. We're getting closer to covering every perk needed before we get to the TydeTyme series. Thank you all for watching. If you like what you saw here, please share this video with your friend, and don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and as always, good game.